In this week, we will start to learn about Java programming at the elementary level. Let's see what the learning objectives are for this week. So we'll let you learn about all the ingredients for programming in Java. So for your previous programming experience, either JavaScript or Python or other language, you might have a very similar correspondence, if any, but we'll try to learn from scratch. So we want to first of all learn about the development process, especially what's the difference between compile time versus runtime, and also what's the difference between syntax versus types. And then we learn about literal values. That's the simplest program you can write as a component. And also we'll learn about data types. Specifically, we talk about numbers, characters, or strings. And we'll learn about what's the difference between name constants versus variables. Why do we need two categories of these items? And also, we talk about variable assignments and also variable reassignments. You can do reassignments as many times as you like. And we want to see what the consequence is for that. And we're going to talk about what the difference is between operations, operators, and operands. And we'll give an example in arithmetic and also relational. And we talk about expressions and also type correctness. It's a very important concept to know what it means for your program to be type correct. And we learn about input and output to see how you can take users' input into your program and then calculate accordingly. And then we'll learn about coercion versus casting. One is manual, the other one is automatic. We'll see how they're different. And then we'll talk about escape sequences. And now overall, given a problem, what you're supposed to do is you want to first plan about how you will solve it mathematically. For example, if you want to calculate the area of a circle, you should really know about the formula and then to know exactly how to plug in the relevant values or variables into your calculation. And then you will try to implement your solution by writing a Java program. So these are always the two stages for your developments. And later on in the course, the problem that you're going to solve might be more complicated, in which case you will still follow the same procedure. It's just that maybe the planning stage might take a little bit longer time. So you might be wondering, so what should be, how can you learn about the planning process over here? I would say pay attention to, as I go through the examples and concept in the lecture, I'll tend to use my iPad to really explain to you the concept. Try to really gain some insight from there, how you can do analysis for the problems, and how you can do reasoning about the derivation process for the solution. Alright, so now, for those of you who may want to gain some extra practice, I will have two references for you before I start the lecture. So number one, some of the examples for the lecture I'm going to mention, they are already included in the so-called Java project archive over here. I want to show you very quickly how you can import it. And then you're really encouraged to maybe try to expand the use by adding the remaining example. Not all the examples in the lecture have been included in this Java archive file. You should really try to put all the remaining example into it. And then, most importantly, if you can try to create your own example, treat it as your own playground and try to introduce as many examples as you like. Okay? If you got trouble thinking about new examples, feel free to visit my office hour. I'll try to give you some inspiration. Okay, let's go over the first point first. So let's switch to Eclipse. Remember from lab number 0, we show you how you can install Eclipse and also how you can launch it. And you may just use the same workspace that we created from the GitHub, right? I'm going to assume you know how to do it. Okay, select that as a workspace and then say launch. And on the desktop, you can see the zip file. That's the archive Java file. Okay, so now my Eclipse has been launched. So now you can see we only got the week number 1. The tutorial example that we created, the projects. So now we're going to import this particular Java archive file over here on the desktop. So what I would do is you want to go to File and then go to Import. And then under General, okay, so if it has not been expanded yet, so expand General and click on Existing Projects into Workspace and say Next. And then, by default, it will simply choose Select Root Directory. You want to override that default. Choose Select Archive File. It's really important. Select Archive File. And then browse to where you actually store the zip file. It's on the desktop. And then you can click on Lecture 01. Okay, let me show you the full name. So you should be able to download this from the lecture site for the course. lecture 01 elementary programming.zip. Okay, open that. Of course, for later lectures, you might be given different zip files. You will follow just the same procedure to import the example projects into your workspace. Okay, and then you'll say finish. Okay, so once you have done that, you will see that there is a red cross over here, meaning that the classes that I gave to you actually contain some errors over here. So these classes that contain error are actually expected. So as you will see later in the lecture, I will actually show you how you can make syntax error, how you can use a runtime error, and etc. Okay, so these errors are supposed to be there, so don't worry. And then many of the examples that I talk about in the lecture, you will see them over here. I'll let you study them to supplement your lecture. All right. So that's about how you can import any given Java archive file. You might be given a Java archive file maybe during the test or maybe for your lab later. But it's really important for you to know how to do this. All right. So let me switch back to extra practice. I talked about the first one. What about the second one? So this is a tutorial series. Let me show it to you. If you simply click on the link, you will see this long tutorial series over here. So this is a complete tutorial series to teach you Java from scratch. I created this series for your fellow students in EECS1021 from the engineering side in winter 2019. It's been 2 years, yes, but all the Java concept, all the Java knowledge is still applicable. So, however, for this term, we're actually going to create from scratch some shortened version or like a different version of the series for you for 1022 purpose. So I would say this series over here, it's there, it's complete. And then for those of you who just want to have more hands-on experience about Java, you are highly encouraged to actually follow them through. I will suggest every week about which videos you may want to watch. Again, it's highly recommended, but it's optional. It's really up to you if you want to have more practice yourself. All right, just go there. And for this week, you want to go over videos number 1 to number 7. Okay, I'll let you do the optional study. But if you got any questions about these videos, feel free to get in touch with me. I'll be happy to help. All right, so now let's start our lecture. We're going to make the following assumption. So for most of your lecture examples or exercises, they will be defined within the context of some main method, meaning that normally we just simply omit these 2 lines about defining the main method. And these you already saw these in your Lab 0. If you haven't, you will see that as you go through the Lab 0 tutorial videos. So these will be the example lines of code that typically we will show. But sometimes we might also show the main method, depends. Okay, for some console application. And it's really important to know, when you got a console application, the main method is treated by Java as the starting points of executing your program. So that will be the entry point of execution. That's why I want to emphasize over here, right at the front. Okay, and I want to review quickly about what you learned in Lab 0 about the separation of concern. Okay, very quickly, because you don't want to get lost in the big picture. It's really important to sometimes really to pause yourself and try to see things from the bird eyes view. Okay, so now we got 3 components over here. We actually got model, okay, and also we got JUnit tests, and also we got console application. As far as the lecture examples are concerned, typically you're only worried about in the beginning, maybe in the week number 1 and 2, possibly. You're only going to worry about console application. So what do we have over here? Whenever you got console application over here, so you're going to get just a single main method for every console application. If you got multiple console applications, you will have multiple classes. Each one of them has a main method. It depends. So they are going to possibly call methods from the model. So this may not happen in the very first 1 or 2 weeks, but it will happen later. Okay, we'll show you later. And they will contain system.out.println statements. And also, however, they don't contain the return statements. They don't. Okay, it's really important, as I illustrated in detail in lab number 0. Okay, so that's about the console application. And on the other hand, we also got JUnit test over here. JUnit test is just another component which will use the model. You can see there are two components that will make use of the model. One is the console application. The other one is the JUnit test. What about the JUnit test? We want to know about what's the actual values that's returned from the methods, and also what's the expected value that we should really return. We want to compare them. How do we compare them? We're going to call maybe methods from the model, and also we want to use assertions to see whether the return value from the methods really match what we expect them to return. And it should contain no print statements. Okay, you can see no return statements, and here no print statement, right? So now, what about for the model package over here? So we also got a model over here. We'll see how we can define methods a little bit later in the semester. So for model, we can have as many classes as we like. Okay, basically for every package, you may list also as many JUnit class as you like, and also as many console applications as you like, as many as you like. So now, what about model? So we're gonna define classes and also methods. And for the method, there'll be no print statements. It's really important. When you contrast the model versus the console application, it's really important to follow the following principle. And this principle will be enforced when you take when you really submit your lab, and also when you take your programming test. In the model package, there will be no print statements. Instead, you will only try to do return some value from each individual method. We'll elaborate on this a little bit later in the semester. And also for the console application, you can think about it as one way to really make use of or to test whatever that's defined in your model. In that case, you will the way we test it, or the way we play with it, is by printing something to the console. That's why you got print statement over here. But here you don't have the print statement. And here you don't have the return statements, but here you do have the return statement, right? It's completely the opposite to each other. All right, so that's separation of concern I would like to remind you. But in the context of for lectures, you should really know the difference between model and also console application. All right, let me switch back. So what happens if you try to execute your console application? Remember what we said in the lab 0. It's going to be a sequential composition of lines of code that's going to be executed. So the execution will start with the first line in the main method, and it will execute line by line from top to bottom. And then until there are no more lines to really execute, and then it will terminate. Later on, when we introduce loops into your program, you have to be cautious about the possible non-termination of your program. Non-termination is always bad. Okay. And then the main method may call methods from other classes, for example, from the model package, right? Remember this particular scenario, we say the console application might be using the model by calling some methods over here, and the methods will actually return some value back to the console application, in which case the console application can simply print out the values, the return values from the methods into the console, right? That's kind of the flow of the data that you have to be aware of. Okay, let me go back. Okay, so now let's talk about the development process. It's really important throughout the semester, whenever you're writing your Java program, you should really know where you are in the development process. Let me go over the different stages with you very quickly. So when you start developing your code, you definitely have to first create a Java class. So this is what it says over here. Create a new Java class over here. And the Java class, maybe there's a Java class for console application, or maybe some class from the model package, right? Depends. And then, of course, you're going to keep writing lines of code in the Eclipse editor. However, it is really important to note, you shouldn't really keep writing without saving your code. So it's really important that you really have to regularly, over here, you want to do this on a regular basis. You want to regularly save your file, and then in Eclipse, whenever you save your file, it is going to compile your program. So think about compile is more like a process to check two things. So whenever you try to compile, it's going to check, number one, the syntax, whether or not you're following the right Java syntax. And number two, the types. I'll talk way more about what it really means to be type correct. But you can think about types are just about how you manipulate values together, whether it's being manipulated in a consistent and sensible way. So that's basically what I mean by types. And that will be checked by the compiler for Eclipse. Okay, so now it's really important to really separate your development process into two stages. Let me highlight it. So think about as soon as you start writing your code in the Eclipse editor until the point that you actually save your file. So this part over here is so-called compile time. Okay, so this is the compile time stage. Compile time. Meaning that you haven't really executed your code just yet. In fact, what can go wrong in the compile time? You can see over here in the compile time, if you got either error for the syntax or you got error for the types, in that case you enter this so-called error states. So you can think about the error states is that means something wrong with your code. Something wrong with your code. Okay, in that case, your code just cannot be executed in this case. Okay, so either syntax or its type. Okay, so that's about the compile time. And later, just a little bit later, I will show you maybe different kinds of a common syntax or type error, just to hopefully you can avoid them. All right, so let's say that you save the file, and then the compiler of Eclipse try to compile your code, and there is neither syntax nor type error. So what's going to happen here? So now I'm going to just put this part of the process will be the second stage. You can think about this stage over here, so-called the runtime. Over here. So this is called the runtime. It's really, really important for you to know the line between the two stages, right? Before this, you haven't executed your code. After this, meaning that you have already compiled your code without any errors. So that's why you can run your code. However, being able to run your code does not really mean everything is all right. That doesn't really mean that way. So there are two possible ways that things might go wrong. Okay, number one, there might be some runtime exception, right? So-called a crash. So if your program simply just crash, meaning that even though it has no type or syntax error, but things simply just crash. I'll give you some example in a little bit later. And also another way things might go wrong. Let's say your program doesn't crash, it does terminate. However, the values or the output that it produces by your program, it simply does not match the expectation. So that's what we so-called logical error. So this might be another way that things might go wrong. You can see there are three things that might go wrong. One thing is from the compile time, the green one, and another two is actually from the runtime, right? It's really important for you to know the difference between the kinds of errors you might run into when you are developing your Java projects. Okay, only if you can see that finally you can if your program. Let me use a different color here. So only if your program actually compiles and also does not crash and also terminates, and then the output is as expected, and then you can claim that your program is actually correct. So this will be the final outcome you would like to achieve. So that's why you're taking this course and many other subsequent courses to make sure you're really a good, not just programmer, but also software engineer, meaning that you have to bear good logic in your program. That's something I would like to show you as much as possible in this course. So think about whenever we declare that our program is correct, so number one, it compiles with no syntax or type error. And also it terminates without any exception being thrown, meaning that it does not crash. And also, the output from your program is as expected. So all these three are the conditions to really characterize that your Java program is actually correct. Okay, it's really important for you to see the development process. Of course, whenever you actually enter the error stage, that means you will have to actually fix your code, right? So that's why there's also another back row error over here. Let me use a different color here. You can see whenever you actually got into some error, either at the compile time or at the runtime, you always have to go back to your editor and then try to do something about it, okay? Let me mention something more, which I will show you later in the lab tutorial video, in the weekly Java tutorial. In the case of crash over here, and also in the case of unexpected output, in order to fix them, okay, in order to fix them, we have to learn something called debugger. that's actually supported by the Eclipse. Debugger simply means we want to get rid of the bugs, the software errors from your code. So it's called debugger. So that's something we will talk about later in the Java tutorial. And then how about when you want to fix the syntax error? If you want to fix the syntax error, you don't really have to use debugger on the Eclipse. Hopefully, after a couple of weeks of the practice about the Java program, hopefully you will be able to be free from the syntax error. To be free from the type errors, it might take a little bit more study about the different example and also some theories, but that's something we'll go through in the lectures. All right, so that's about the development process for your Java program. I try to touch everything, as many as possible, even though we haven't covered them yet, but they will be later in the course. So try to take notes about these terms, and hopefully once we get to them later, it will make sense.